I was at the 99-cent store a few weeks ago and picked up a couple packages of these white chocolate chips. So I wanted to make the cookies, and the only recipes I could find had unsweetened chocolate squares in them, and I had cocoa as a flavoring. So I spent most of the evening going through my enormous library of cookbooks trying to find one that used cocoa and not chocolate chips for the chocolate part of the cookie. And I finally had the bright idea to look at the back of the bag, and there it is, double chocolate cookies, and it uses cocoa instead of chocolate chips for the chocolatey flavor of the cookie. So that was awesome. One thing I did find out when I was looking for this recipe is that you can make a substitution if you do not have squares of baking chocolate. You can use cocoa, and my Betty Crocker picture cookbook said as a substitution, 1 square unsweetened chocolate, which equals 1 ounce, is 3 to 4 tablespoons cocoa plus half a tablespoon shortening. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you want to make something chocolate and you just have cocoa or whatever, and you do not have baking chocolate, just 3 to 4 tablespoons cocoa, half a tablespoon shortening, and you're good to go per ounce or per square. So the only downfall of this particular recipe is that it's impossible to read. Impossible. Really tiny font, and it's white lettering on a darker background. So I wrote down the ingredients here. 1 1/4 cup flour, 6 tablespoons cocoa powder, half a teaspoon baking soda, half a teaspoon salt, half a cup softened butter, 1 cup sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon vanilla, and the chocolate chips. You do the batter, the sugar and egg, then you add the dry ingredients. No, then you do the batter the usual way, dry in one bowl, wet in the other, the sugar and the butter first, then the egg and the vanilla, then the dry ingredients, and finally folding in the chips. It says it makes 24 cookies, put in about 2 inches apart at 375. So let's get started. So here it is. My wet ingredients are good to go. I have my cup of sugar, which is actually not a wet ingredient, but it always gets mixed up with the butter or margarine or whatever first. I'm going to put that in the bowl. I have half a cup of softened butter, margarine. I have a big tub of this country crock in the refrigerator, so I just grabbed some of that. And I'm going to put that in the bowl too. I'm going to grab my hand mixer and start mixing that until it's light and fluffy. First it'll be all crumbly, but don't give up hope, keep going. All right, here's what you're looking for, kind of a smoother consistency. Now I already prepared the egg and the vanilla. I cracked the egg open, I mixed it up, and I threw the vanilla in there. I believe it was 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'm just going to pour that right in and mix it together with the sugar and the margarine. Here we are, the nice, smooth, creamy finished product. I'm going to set this aside, and I'll start putting together our dry ingredients. All right, here's my cup and a half of flour. As per the instructions, I'm going to put in 6 tablespoons of cocoa. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it also calls for half a teaspoon salt and a half a teaspoon baking soda. So I don't have a half a teaspoon here, so I'm just going to do 2/4 teaspoons. So here's my baking soda right there. Actually, that's my baking powder. Excuse me. Good to always check. Here is my baking soda. There you go. I'm going to put 2/4 teaspoons. 1, 2 for a 1/2 teaspoon baking soda. And I'm going to put in 2/4 teaspoons for a total of a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. One, always tricky. 2. All right, that accomplished. I'm going to take the whisk and quickly mix this all up. And I'm going to start putting it into the bowl with the wet ingredients, running the hand mixer the entire time. All right, and the recipe called for a cup of chocolate chips, which is about 2/3 of the bag, so I'm setting the bag aside, the rest of it for another project. I'm going to put those in. The thing with the addition of chocolate chips or nuts is you don't want to have the hand blender or the food processor involved because it will tear everything up. So I'm just going to pour them in, take my spatula, kind of fold them in like that. So they're all well mixed in without being ripped apart by the blades of the mixer. Make sure it's well in there so every cookie has a couple of chips in them. It's always a sign of a good chocolate chip cookie. There's more than one pathetic little chip in it. All right, these look pretty good. I'm going to turn the oven to 375 and get started with putting these on a cookie tray. All right, here's my first scoop. These are kind of drop cookies, sticky ones. So I'm just going to drop them. They say to have about 2 inches between them, so I imagine they spread quite a bit, depending on how big you make them. I've got this, I guess it's a soup spoon. I'm going to just put them on the tray like this and throw them in the oven and see what happens, how much they spread, and that'll determine how we set up our next cookie sheet. I always like to do an experimental one first. Here we go. We got 6 on there. They're going to go in the oven and we'll check it out. Here's our first batch out of the oven. They're looking good. They release readily from the parchment paper. And I'm going to go ahead and put them on the cookie rack. Here's the back of it. And let those cool for a second and prepare another cookie sheet with cookies. And we're just going to go assembly line style with these until all the batter's gone. Well, I ended up getting 36 cookies out of this. I made them a little bit smaller, put about 9 to 10 on a cookie sheet, and I must say they came out beautifully. I have these on the drying rack, and I also have half my cookie jar full. I split one in half so you can see what they look like inside. They're kind of crisp on the outside and nice and chewy on the inside with plenty of chocolate chips. So these are going to be just great. I think they're going to hold up well in the cookie jar for a week or so if they last that long. Thank you so much for joining me today as I made the double chocolate chip cookies with the 99-cent store Baker's White Chocolate Chip chips. And although I made these from scratch, all the ingredients are readily available at either the Dollar Tree or 99-cent store. We're talking about margarine and salt and baking soda, flour, vanilla, all that stuff I've seen there, all of it, including eggs. So you can do this too. Very inexpensive, makes a lot of cookies, and absolutely delicious. Thank you so much for watching.